The quest for Guybrush is the latest instalment in the Monkey Island Tall Tales to come to Sea of Thieves, and I've had a few people ask me about the insult sword fighting and how it works. So in today's video we're going to go over how the insult sword fighting system works in Sea of Thieves, how you can get your commendations in the Tall Tale, and hopefully help you understand how this all works. Hello pirates, my name is Ellie and I post regular Sea of Thieves videos on this channel. If you want to stay up to date with the game, then remember to subscribe and hit the bell to be notified when I put up a new video. Now before we get started, this is your spoiler warning. I am going to be talking about the insult sword fighting that happens in the new Tall Tale, and so if you don't want to see any footage of the new Tall Tale, or if you haven't done it yet, then I'd advise you to click away now. So first of all, this all takes place on Melee Island in the quest for Guybrush Tall Tale. There is a small chance that insult sword fighting will make its way into the adventure mode for Sea of Thieves in some way or another, and so it's worth learning how it works now, even if you're not interested in the Monkey Island Tall Tales. Now, the basics are that you need to fight a number of opponents to learn insults and their corresponding retorts. There are 10 insults and 10 retorts that you need to learn to unlock the commendation and to be able to progress the Tall Tale to meet the Swordmaster. So before you get to learning the insults and retorts, you will need to have got yourself the sword from the shop in town and done the Circus Spectacular event and earned the pieces of 8 from there. After this, you can head to Captain Smirk's cabin near to Stan's shipyard and you can begin the sword fighting trial. There is a small amount of training that you can do with Captain Smirk in his cabin with the legendary machine where he gives you the basics of insults and retorts. However, then you're on your own to learn all the remaining insults and retorts before being classed as ready to meet the Swordmaster. The important thing to remember is that you will not win every mini encounter because you will have situations where you know the insult but you don't know the retort because you haven't learnt it yet. Until you have learned all 10 insults and all 10 retorts, there is a chance that you will lose fights entirely as well, but that's okay. It is pretty straightforward to learn the insults and retorts from each enemy encounter. You just need to make sure that you take your time and that you read the lines of dialogue very carefully before you make your selection. So you will have been given a map which shows you where the sword fighting spots are on Melee Island. It's essentially a big circuit around the island on the main path, so it's not that hard to figure out. Each encounter takes place under these lanterns like this, and as you approach them they turn green. After this, Murray, the talking skull, appears and you can talk with him and select the last option to start the fight with the ghost pirate opponent. So what you want to do is slash the enemy and wait until you are offered the option to insult them, or retort if you are insulted first. Each of the insults in the game has a specific response, which will be the only option that will win that encounter. For example, if you are insulted first, then you have to retort with the right response, otherwise you will lose. Obviously, as you are learning, you will experience situations where you don't know the retort because you haven't learnt it yet. This is where you can just use any of the generic responses at the bottom. What you then do is use the insult that they just used on you, on them, on your next go. They will then respond with the appropriate retort, which means you've then learnt that retort and can respond with it next time you are insulted with that insult. The game does give you some decent clues as to which options to choose because it will highlight the insults and retorts that you haven't yet used in a fight with a yellow blob next to them. If you're paying attention closely, you should find that it's quite easy to work through the opponents and learn all the insults and corresponding retorts. Like I said, there are 20 in total, so 10 insults and 10 corresponding retorts, and we found on our playthroughs that we were learning around 1 or 2 insults and retorts per fight. However, in order to be classed as good enough to meet with the Swordmaster, you will have had to have used every single insult and retort in the fights that you have had. It's not good enough to have just learned the insults and retorts, you have to have used them as well. So you may find yourself in a situation where you've learned the retort, probably the last one you needed, but because you haven't used it in a fight, you won't unlock the progression to the next stage of the trial. All you need to do if this happens to you is head to the nearest sword fighting spot and make sure that you've used all the options with yellow blobs next to them. So to recap, you start the fight by speaking to Murray at the fighting spot, you select an insult when prompted, and if the opponent knows the retort, then the fight continues. If they don't know, then you win that mini encounter. You continue insulting and retorting until one of you doesn't know the answer enough times that the other one wins the fight. If you don't know a retort, then just use any of the generic options, and then when you are given the chance to insult, you can just use the insult that they just used on you in order to learn the retort from the pirate that you are fighting. There are 10 insults and 10 retorts available when you're learning them while preparing with standard sword fighting enemies on Melee Island. However, when you come to the next phase of the Tall Tale and you're fighting Ribsy, you will find that he insults you in different ways. You will need to take your time and read the retorts you have available, because his insults will differ from the normal ones you've heard before, but your retorts will remain the same. All you need to do is choose the option that makes sense. So, for example, there's an insult he uses where he says he thinks the fight will go swimmingly or something like that, and you can then retort with the dry land response. You'll get the hang of it by the time you fought all the pirates in preparation for the fight with Ribsy. Just take your time and make sure that what you are responding with actually makes sense and relates to the insult that they've just used. That's all there is to it. I hope this video was helpful and that you can now get all you need to get out of the insult sword fighting part of the quest for Guybrush Tall Tale. Thanks again for watching, and I'll see you on the seas.